Hi guys, it's Janae and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm continuing my read along of Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish. And I just quickly want to mention that, sorry number one for being late with putting up the schedule for this particular stream, but also I because Comic Con is tomorrow and we're leaving early and I didn't get a lot of time to sort everything out before tomorrow. I am only going to be doing an hour stream tonight, so I'm really sorry about that, but I thought at least an hour is better than no stream at all. I hope you guys are okay with that and feel the same. um, but yeah, to make things easier for me, I haven't been getting enough sleep and I need to get up early tomorrow, so I just figured it might be best to cut it off just a little bit earlier. So we're only going to be doing an hour. Hi! But if you're new here, hi, I'm Janae. I do down my read-alongs, and we are currently busy with volume 1 of the novel that I mentioned. And I have tea here with me. Generally speaking, it's a 2-hour stream, and on the hour I take a 10-minute break, but because we're only doing an hour today, I am just gonna do that hour and we're gonna finish up and there will be no breaks. So I'm really sorry, but we'll do what we can within that time. I'm only on five of 7. Oh, okay, I understand. For a moment I was like, but I understand you mean the amount of live read-alongs of this that you've watched, and now we're on 7. Um, yeah, if you want to come back, that's okay. Uh, but anyway, hi again. So, okay, I think we can more or less just get started. I don't want to delay this. Let me just quickly take a sip. I'm still so incredibly excited about Comic Con. It's my one event a year where I feel validated as a nerd. So, as if my channel doesn't exist. But anyway. Okay, let us get going. Let me just make sure here. We were at the top of page 274. I just kind of want to situate myself here so that I don't end up bumping the mic. Okay. So we had Prince Jing discover a suspicious pink piece of food behind one of his scales. Since he was Prince Jing's fish, there was no need to worry about getting the water dirty, as the servants changed his water frequently enough. But this piece of food was pink. Oh hell. A peach blossom pastry. He ate a couple pieces of the peach blossom pastries while he was human, and when he turned back into a fish, his mouth was still stuffed full. He'd remembered to wipe his face, but it seemed like he hadn't wiped it clean. How could he have known that it'd fall onto his fin after he transformed? Leo felt guilty, and he was afraid that his identity was once again in danger of being found out. Prince Jing was lost in thought for a bit. He looked around the room and seemed to guess that it was the peach blossom pastry from the table. In spite of himself, the corners of his mouth twitched a few times. Since the little fish could jump around the room, he might have jumped onto the peach blossom pastry. Did he perhaps want to eat one too? Prince Jing wondered. Well, why not? The pastry was vegetarian, so it was probably alright for the fish to eat. He slowly walked over and brought the plates of peach blossom pastries to the tank, breaking a pastry in pieces and sprinkling it into the clear water. Leo froze for a moment, shaking his body happily. Prince Jing hadn't even considered suspecting him, and instead he was feeding him peach blossom pastries personally. This was the last thing he'd expected. Sob, sob, sob. He felt touched, somehow. I don't know if you should be that happy yet. Like, now that he has the plate in his hands, he might notice the difference in size. The texture of the broken peach blossom pastry in the water was still quite nice to a fish. Seeing how happily the fish was eating, Prince Jing picked up a piece for himself. But as he brought it to his mouth, he just so happened to glance over at the remaining pastries from the corner of his eye. The pastries were arranged as they usually were, but it was obvious that the number was wrong. The Imperial family was very particular about things, so even snacks and fruits given to them had to be an auspicious number. But it was clear that, even counting the one in his hand and the one he fed the fish, this was not an auspicious number of pastries. The peach blossom pastries had been touched. As soon as he realized this, Prince Jing immediately put down the pastry in his hand. He knew the servants would never dare to touch things in his room, so there was only one person it could have been. Luckily, the pastries weren't poisonous, or his fish. Prince Jing's gaze grew heavy as he watched the little fish, with a small piece of peach blossom pastry on his head, impatiently trying to push another piece into his mouth. The little fish's cuteness disrupted his train of thought. Oh, thank goodness, because, I mean, to be fair, I would also be stressed if I thought, okay, maybe this food was poisoned and I just fed it to my pet without any forethought. Jing shook the jade bell and summoned the guards outside his room. All the guards reported the same thing. Before Your Highness came, only Ye Shizi and Wang Shigonggong entered the room, and definitely nobody else. Ye Shizi visited with his dog, and when Ye Shizi left, the dog stayed in the room for a bit before running out on his own. As to whether or not Xiongfeng had a letter in his mouth when he ran out of the room, the guards weren't sure. Prince Jing rubbed the spot between his brows. None of this made sense. If Ye Yan and Wang Shi were the only ones who entered the room, then what in the world had caused the clothes to be moved? Um, we are at Prince Jing potentially figuring out Shadia's secret because he ate a pastry. Um, sorry, let's try again. Then what in the world had caused the clothes to be moved, and the incorrect number of peach blossom pastries? If the thief entered the room without the guards noticing, it would have been impossible for him to get out, since the windows were sealed. The thief was still able to come and go as he liked, even though Prince Jing had already made several arrangements. Tianqi, Xiongfeng seems to have recovered. Wang Shi led Ying Yan and his pet dog into the room. Xiongfeng excitedly bounded to the fish tank, wagging his tail at the little carp to tell him he'd completed the task and begging to be praised. That is the best. I've missed a bunch of live streams and I'm trying to catch up. I'm so sorry, but I mean, you're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to come back when you are fully briefed on the previous live streams. Um, Leo swam over quickly and flicked his tail twice too. Stupid dog, don't loiter around me. But dogs couldn't understand fish. When Xiongfeng saw the little carp swimming towards him, he tried nosing the fish. He just bumped into the crystal wall every time, but he still kept on trying. Ye Jinghan embarrassingly looked on as his dog continued to act stupidly. No. This scene reminded Prince Jing of something. When Xiongfeng delivered the letter to Ye Qingyan, he was mostly wet, and he was still slightly wet even now. But the fish tank in the room wasn't broken, and it was impossible for Xiongfeng to get into the fish tank. So how did he get wet? Nothing made sense. From the unidentifiable, unlocatable young man who kept appearing in his room, to the clothes and peach blossom pastries that had been moved even though nobody had entered or left the room. Okay, but here's my question. When he transforms into a human, does he have to get out of the fish tank himself every time? Or does he like appear outside of the fish tank after transforming just as a virtue of like part of the gift or skill? Because I'm suspecting it's the former because otherwise he wouldn't be wet and he wouldn't pass that wetness on to Xiongfeng. But then why is the floor dry? You know, why isn't it obvious that someone has been walking around with wet feet or something like that? Um, Hi. Okay. He felt like he almost had it. Just a little more, and he could connect everything together and figure out the truth. When Wang Shi finished recounting everything, Ye Qingyan, Ye Qingyan's eyes widened. He gulped. Tianqi, he said with a hesitant expression on his face. Your room wouldn't be haunted, would it? I mean, to be fair, that's kind of like on the logical spectrum of explanations at this point. It's, dare I say it, more logical than the idea that a fish is transforming into a human. Haunted? Prince Jing paused and gave a cold laugh. Where would he get a ghost? Definitely not. At most, just a thief. And even if there were ghosts, he wasn't afraid. Zhongfeng barked excitedly a few times, still wanting to poke the fish with his nose. Prince Jing saw his little fish shrewdly hide among the rocks, only leaving his tail out. Prince Jing, who wasn't afraid of ghosts, was calmed even more by the sight of his fish. Things couldn't continue like this. He wasn't afraid of thieves, but he was afraid that the thieves would do something to Xiao Ye, and increasing his defenses hadn't accomplished anything. Prince Jing glanced at Wang Shi. Since increasing his defenses wasn't effective, there was only one other option. Yu Qingyan thought Prince Jing's fish and his own Shongfeng were somehow fated, so he wanted to take the fish back to Chang'an Manor and take care of him for a couple of days. That way, he could experience the joy of having a fish as well. But before he could bring this up to Prince Jing, he saw Wang Shi take out a crystal bottle that was much larger than an ordinary tea bowl. Oh my word, is Prince Jing about to suggest that? Because if him suggesting it makes sense, but if um, Ye Qingyan had been the one to suggest it himself, I doubt he would have gone for it. Well, it looked like a crystal bottle. It was adorned with a golden cap and had a handle that made it to make it easier to carry. Wang Shi opened the crystal bottle without delay, poured in some clean water, and carefully put the little fish, still hiding in the rocks, inside. The little carp swam around in happy curiosity as soon as he was plopped into the crystal bottle. Ye Qingyan was stunned. What are you guys doing? Wang Shi smiled and responded, His Highness is worried about Master Fish, so he'll bring him wherever he goes. There are holes on the golden cap, so he won't suffocate. It's perfect for Master Fish. Thank you for addressing that, because I was just wondering and worrying. Ye Qingyan was bewildered beyond belief. It's not enough you put him in the large fish tank that the Emperor gifted you. You're going to take him everywhere with you? To think he even considered asking Prince Jing for his fish. He was going to bring the fish with him everywhere. There was no damn point. Prince Jing cast a derisive glance at Ye Shizi, picked up the crystal bottle, and left. Yeah, thank goodness this happened before you dared to ask, because in hindsight, I don't know what he would have done to you. Chapter 27. Fish are solitary as snow. Oh goodness, that sounds dramatic. Prince Jing decided to keep him in a crystal bottle and take him everywhere was both lucky and unlucky for Li Ye. The Tyrant master worrying about his fish's safety was obviously a sign of affection. Li Ye was touched, but if he was spending all his time in a bottle with a lid, it would be impossible for him to turn into a human. By the time he realized this, though, he'd already been carried around for most of the day. The outside world was just so enticing. Leah had never thought he'd be able to spend a day looking around like this as a fish. So he kept his fish eyes open, swimming idly in his bottle and taking in the sights. Everyone greeted him properly when they saw him, satisfying little Leah's modest ego. Modest? We'll agree to disagree. Okay, sure, they were actually greeting Prince Jing, but it felt good to pretend once in a while. Prince Jing liked to take his fish around with him too, since it was convenient. The fish tank was so heavy that a person had to be specifically assigned to carry it. Tea bowls or regular bowls were too shallow, and the fish could fall out if he wasn't careful. The crystal bottle solved all these problems. He could even bring it into the palace with him. Having experienced the benefits for himself, Prince Jing wanted to keep the fish in the crystal bottle. At first, Li Ye was pretty happy with this, but a couple of days passed and he realized Prince Jing had no intention of putting him back in the fish tank at all. Oh, that's not nice. Like, at least give him a breather of, like, being able to sleep in his tank or something like that. He was actually trapped in here. He was much less pleased with this development. The bottle allowed him to stay with his master all the time, but he couldn't do any of his missions or turn into a human. He could only watch the opportunities rushed as opportunities rushed past him. Not to mention how uncomfortable it was. A fish trapped in a bottle was as solitary as a flake of snow. He had to get Prince Jing to understand that the bottle might be convenient, but it'd be better if he didn't stay in here too long, for the sake of his mental and physical health. At first, he wanted to take extreme measures to demonstrate his dissatisfaction. He thought about trying to scare Prince Jing by flipping upside down and showing his underbelly. But then he saw Prince Jing order Wang Shi to affix a chain to the bottle's handle and wrap the chain around his hand a few times so that he wouldn't drop and break the crystal bottle. Prince Jing's palm turned red from the strain. The little carp's heart felt a bit sore and tender. Being uncomfortable because he was trapped in a bottle was one thing, but it was far more uncomfortable, heartbreaking even, to see Prince Jing in such pain for his sake. Nia didn't want to scare him anymore. Prince Jing had never had a pet before, so he had no way of knowing what a fish would want. Putting Li in a bottle was intended as a kind gesture. All he had to do was somehow let Prince Jing know that he didn't like being in there. It wasn't like he had a grudge against the prince or anything, so he ought to find a better way than making him scared that his fish had died. Leo suppressed his curiosity towards the outside world and floated peacefully at the bottom of the bottle. The little carp was usually lively and active, so when he became quiet and peaceful, it was a noticeable change. The moment the moment Prince Jing glanced at Leo, he was immensely confused. His fish was in high spirits just now, so why had he become listless all of a sudden? Worried that the hole at the top might be blocked, Prince Jing checked it not once but twice. There was nothing wrong with the crystal bottle, but his fish was still lethargic, and he wasn't perking up. Prince Jing ordered the servant who'd raised fish before to come over, afraid that the fish was sick again. Every time the servant was called over to diagnose the fish, it was always a false alarm. This time was no different. He held the crystal bottle and looked him over several times, but he didn't see anything wrong with the fish. Prince Jing's fish was fine as usual. However, the servant had kept many pets before and knew that they didn't like being cooped up, so he mustered his courage to tell Prince Jing in tactful terms that Master Fish wasn't used to being sealed in a bottle all the time. After all, The crystal tank the fish was originally kept in was quite large. Switching him to a small vessel meant his swimming range would become narrower, and eventually he wouldn't want to move anymore. The servant felt a little regretful after he spoke. It had been Prince Jing's idea to put his fish in the crystal bottle, but Prince Jing also insisted that he tell the truth, putting the servant in a tough spot. But Prince Jing nodded, understanding what the servant meant. So that's what it was. The crystal bottle was convenient for taking his fish around, but he couldn't let him stay in there all the time, or Xiaoye would become unhappy. He had to consider what the fish wanted to. Oh my goodness, he is like, I love how receptive he is to feedback. We appreciate that in one of our protagonists. That's really good. Hi. Oh goodness, that is. It is interesting, and I appreciate how sincere the servants and like Wang Gonggong are being towards not only Prince Jing but by extension to Xiaoye as well. And it makes sense because like you're gonna try and do your best for the prince, but still, it's nice that they're not taking Xiaoye as being replaceable. Okay, let's see. But he couldn't leave his poor little fish alone in his room, helpless against thieves. Fishing came up with a compromise quickly. He ordered fish tanks and large tea bowls to be placed around his residence in spots he often frequented. That way, the fish could still accompany him once he arrived at his destination. The fish would be taken out of the crystal bottle and placed inside a nearby fish tank or a tea bowl. Problem solved. Leah only had to pretend to be listless for about 2 hours before he found out he'd achieved his goal. I mean, sort of. Sort of. He could spend more of his time in fish tanks now. Prince Jing opened the lid of the bottle and placed the bottle in the fish tank himself. The little carp finally stopped wilting and jumped out of the crystal bottle like an arrow shot from a bow. It was better for a fish to stay in a fish tank. Leah sighed with emotion as he swam comfortably. He looked back at the bottle, which was still in the tank. It wasn't that he didn't like staying with Prince Jing all the time. After all, that was part of his master's kindness. To show his gratitude, Leah danced a special seaweed dance around the crystal bottle, trying his hardest to show Prince Jing what he felt. The bottle was great, and he was happy to follow Prince Jing around as long as he wasn't constantly trapped inside. Prince Jing, of course, could tell that his fish liked it. He smiled and softly pinched the fish's slippery back. The human and fish had reached a compromise. Oh my goodness. Hold on. Leah had spent a good while celebrating this turn of events, but the realization abruptly hit him that even if he got to be in a fish tank instead of the bottle, he was still with Prince Jing 24/7. There we go. What was he going to do? He still had no way to transform. Had his once a day transformation skills functionally become a none a day transformation skill? Leah's head hurt. Should he let Prince Jing know that the thief, the one Prince Jing thought was going to hurt his fish, was actually him? No. Right now, his plan was to save others. No. Right now, his plan to save others was more important than the stress that came with not being able to transform. Leah's plan to save Ye Shizi had already been implemented. Over the last couple of days he spent in the crystal bottle, he'd heard Wang Xi tell Prince Jing that the people of the House of Chang'an had already started to keep an eye on the movements of the second and sixth princes, just as Ye Qingyan had promised. Liu's goal in sending the letter was to alert the House of Chang'an. Without the romance storyline between Prince Jing and the little concubine, he wasn't actually sure if Yeshiza's betrothal to the Jingju princess would still end up happening. He tried his best to give a shortened version of events in the letter. It didn't matter if this plot didn't end up happening or if the letter was treated as fake, as long as the House of Chang'an didn't fall into the trap the second and sixth princes had set for them. Though Prince Jing kept getting in his way, and his identity was constantly in danger of being exposed, Leah thought the rescue mission went pretty smoothly. But there was no notification of completion for the impenetrable defense mission to save Yeshiza. If there was no notification, then it meant that the mission wasn't completed. Leah's main goal was the saving people part. Finishing the side quest and receiving the rewards was less important. But when he thought about it, it did mean that it wasn't enough to alert the House of Chang'an by sending them a letter. Was it possible that Yeshiza might still suffer the same tragic fate as he did in the original book? Yeah, that's the question, is like, how are we gonna protect him when you're just a fish? He'd made up his mind to save others, so he shouldn't half-ass it. But if sending a letter wasn't enough, what else could he do? In the original book, Liu remembered that the trap that doomed Ying Yan was sprung in the palace, just a couple of days after the Dragon Boat Festival. He'd mentioned it in the letter, but he wasn't sure how Ying Yan would react, so he figured the most direct solution would be to stop Yeshiza from entering the palace during this period of time. The farther he was from the trap, the better. But stopping Yeshiza from entering the palace was even harder than writing and sending him a letter. He might have been able to stop Prince Jing from going, but his fins were too short to reach Ying Yan, who lived in Chang'an Manor. That is the problem. But I like how he stated it, like his fins were too short, not like just, oh, they weren't near enough to him. Leo worried so hard that his fish head hurt. Would he suffer scale loss from thinking too hard? If he thought about it, he thought dizzily. Hadn't he already gone bald? Luckily, Prince Jing had the same thoughts he did. Wang Shi had only said that the House of Chang'an had made preparations, but Prince Jing had no idea what Ye Qingyan was planning to do, so he ordered someone to grab Ye Shize and bring him over. Wang Shi gave him a good scolding on behalf of Prince Jing. Ye Shize was a little dejected, just when he thought Prince Jing had finally started to care for him. I mean, he did. He just has a very weird way of showing it. Prince Jing also wanted Ye Qingyan to avoid the palace for those couple of days. As expected from our master, thought Liye, who was listening excitedly from the fish tank. They were truly kindred spirits. Yeshize would listen to Prince Jing, right? But Ye Qingyan shook his head and refused. Tianchi, I can't just not enter the palace because of what was written in the letter. Ye Qingyan knew that Prince Jing was only suggesting this because he was worried about him, but he also knew that he couldn't refuse to enter the palace for no reason. For one thing, it was an imperial edict. Keeping his guard up on account of the letter was one thing, but if he deceived the emperor or refused to obey the edict because of a few words on an unproven letter from an anonymous source, his parents, and the entire House of Chang'an for that matter, would never forgive him. I mean, it's the never being forgiven by your parents, or it's my parents and I all die. You know, there's quite actually a simple choice to this, but I understand how you kind of maybe don't take it seriously enough to make that choice as simple as it is. I will do as I always have, said Jie Qingyan with an easy smile. I'd like to see how those people plan to harm me. Because he just wants our nerves to fry. Seriously, what a stubborn idiot. Prince Jing judged Ye Qingyan for his recklessness, but after a moment of thought, he gave Wang Shi a meaningful glance. Wang Shi was almost moved to tears. Ye Shizi, don't worry. His Highness has decided to enter the palace with you when the time comes. As long as His Highness is there, you'll be fine. Tenchi, thanks so much. Ye Qingyan was momentarily touched. Prince Jing was normally so indifferent to others. He wanted to step forward and pat his older cousin on the shoulder, but Prince Jing waved him away, aggravated. Leah felt like this was familiar somehow. The sparkly expression on Yeshiza's face and the way he looked like he was barely restraining himself from rushing to Prince Jing, even though he'd just been rejected. He thought carefully for a moment. Wasn't he just like Shafeng? Shafeng always wanted to poke him with his nose. Leah would hide, afraid, but even through the crystal, Shafeng wouldn't give up on poking him. I love that that is not the dynamic he has with Shafeng. Like, oh, I also have a newly acquired friend who I may or may not like. He took another look at Yeshizi. It was like he'd grown a tail, just like Shafeng's. Liu could almost see it wagging happily behind him. Dogs really do take after their masters. In the original book, Prince Jing didn't accompany Ye Qingyan to the palace. Now that Prince Jing was going to go with him, they could take care of each other. Liu felt much more at ease, and since Prince Jing had been taking his fish wherever he went lately, Liu was definitely going to enter the palace too. He'd be able to keep an eye on Ye Shizi in person. Well, thank goodness for that. Like, weirdly, I feel like that's a good thing. 10 days later, as the Dragon Boat Festival approached, the king of the country of Jinju came to the imperial city to have an audience with the emperor. The emperor had the Ministry of Rites arrange a banquet with King Jinju in the Taihe Hall. Since it was an imperial banquet, Prince Jing and Ye Qingyan had been invited as well. When they saw the 16-year-old girl next to King Jinju greet the emperor, the two of them looked at each other in silent understanding. So this was the princess of Jinju? It was just as the anonymous informant had said. These people the letter had named, who they thought had nothing to do with them, were really starting to show up. Prince Jing and Ye Qingyan both tensed up. The emperor had received a letter from King Jinju recently saying he wanted his youngest princess to marry into the imperial dynasty. Diplomatic relations between the two countries were good, so the emperor readily agreed. As for who the princess was to marry, the emperor mentally went through the list of men in the imperial city of the appropriate age. The highest ranking options were obviously his princes, but since Princess Jinju was a foreigner, it wasn't proper for her to become a princess consort. King Jinju had mentioned in his letter that the princess did not want to become a concubine either. The emperor thought of Prince Jing. Prince Jing was unmarried and couldn't inherit the throne, so it would be possible for him to marry Princess Jinju. But he immediately dismissed the idea. Since Prince Jing was mute, the princess might not like him. Okay? What's more, since he hadn't chosen a crown prince yet, that meant Prince Jing held the de facto highest status as the D prince. If he let Prince Jing marry a foreigner, then how could he arrange the other princes' marriages? Okay, that's good to know. It means we'll see more of her. The emperor decided not to choose from the princes and turned his sights towards the other sons of noble families that matched Princess Jinju. It wasn't long at all before Yeshizi from the house of Chang'an came to his attention. There in Taihe Hall, the emperor smiled and said, Yeshizi, I'm putting the safety of King Jinju and the princess and the imperial city in your hands. Yet Ying Yan felt his blood run cold. He gritted his teeth and knelt to accept the edict. This is a mess. Like, you walk right into that thing. So I feel as if this is the kind of issue where even if he wasn't present at the banquet, it wouldn't have been like that wouldn't have made the issue avoidable. Once he sat down at the banquet, Prince Jing took out the crystal bottle from his sleeve. I love how everything is just hidden in sleeves at this point. The etiquette at the Imperial banquets was complicated, and he wasn't sure if his little fish had been stuck for too long. He hadn't wanted to bring his fish into the palace at first, but the little carp swam into the crystal bottle and refused to come out, staring right at him with eyes like shining black jade. Prince Jing smiled. He had no choice but to shove the crystal bottle with the fish inside into his sleeve. I mean, you do have a choice. You could have just left the bottle in the water, but I understand that you have no way of saying no when your fish is involved. I mean, I'm assuming the sleeves have more pockets than the average modern woman's dress, so don't worry about it. When he took the crystal bottle out, everyone around him was shocked. Did Prince Jing take a fish with him everywhere he went? Most of them had seen the large crystal tank Prince Jing had moved out with, and for a while they were rendered speechless. The second prince was sitting among the other princes, chatting and laughing happily with others while looking very crown princely, turned pale at the moment he laid eyes on this fish. Second prince, we meet once more. Liu flapped his tail casually at Mu Tianzhao. He was going to ruin the second prince's plans again. Oh goodness. This I feel like he's genuinely starting to enjoy the torment he's causing the second prince. Chapter 28. Can't eat the fish. Oh no, that sounds like the cat is involved again, or someone who thinks that they're going to be funny by suggesting that the fish was brought for food. When Prince Jing took out the crystal bottle, Wang Xi, not far behind him, stepped forward and placed a small fish tank carved from coral on his table. Clear water had already been prepared in advance, so Prince Jing rolled up his sleeves and put the fish into the water himself, watching him swim about freely for a bit. Prince Jing glanced at Wang Xi, wanting to feed the fish. Wang Xi took out a bamboo box of fish food and handed it to Prince Jing. He then turned around and glanced at the servants who'd accompanied him. One by one, they brought over the pastries they'd already carried over from Prince Jing's residence and placed them neatly in front of the fish tank. My goodness, I swear this fish is being treated better than the emperor himself. Mm. Prince Jing took 2 pieces of fish food and dropped them into the tank. Then he took a peach blossom pastry and split it in half, crushing one half for his little fish and eating the remaining half as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. With nothing to do but carefully watch Prince Jing feed his fish, the onlookers wondered if they were going blind, or perhaps mad. Was this the real Prince Jing? After Prince Jing placed him in the fish tank, Liu docilely rubbed himself against Prince Jing's fingers. The fish food and peach blossom pastry floated towards the bottom. The little carp was getting tired of the same old thing lately. He guzzled the peach blossom pastry first, and when he was half full, he started on fish food. Seeing how happily the little fish was eating, Prince Jing took another type of dessert, a Yin Yan pastry, and broke it into pieces to feed him. Liu was happy to try new food, so he gave it a taste. The new pastry tasted like peppermint, which was a cooling sensation that rushed straight to his head. Oh, this is interesting. Is it maybe gonna like drug him by accident? like have a weird reaction to his fish system. As a human, he would have liked it, but he couldn't stand it as a fish. Leo took a bite and tossed it away, then happily went back to the peach blossom pastry. Prince Jing watched. It was clear that his fish didn't like the Ying Yan pastry. "There's no need to prepare that pastry anymore," he said. Wang Gong, known for understanding Prince Jing so well, he might as well be a mind reader, immediately ordered the servants to note that down. The servants nodded repeatedly. The people sitting around Prince Jing were astounded. Ying Yan was the only one who didn't find it weird. That's only because he's had a few days of getting used to the intimacy between man and fish. As music played around them, the second prince, Mu Tianzhao, stood. The Ministry of Rites had arranged for the oldest prince, the second prince, to lead the others in toasting King Jinju at the Imperial banquet. Mu Tianzhao was a natural conversationalist and was graceful and dignified, so his conversation with King Jinju was quite joyous. King Jinju praised Mu Tianzhao and drank 3 cups in a row. The emperor was satisfied with Mu Tianzhao's attitude. When King Jinju praised the second prince, the emperor looked good too. Being capable and proper was another of the second prince's strong points. Mu Tianzhao could tell that the emperor was in a good mood, and he gazed at the smaller figure beside King Jinju with a smile. He'd suffered several setbacks in succession recently, and the emperor wasn't really pleased with him. But the spy he'd placed in Qianqing Palace had recently sent him a message that King Jinju planned to marry his princess off during his visits. Okay, let me just prepare myself mentally for this because I'm still kind of scared. I don't necessarily think it's guaranteed that Li is going to be able to save him. Wu Tianzhao had put in quite a lot of effort to restore the relationship between himself and Prince Jing, but Prince Jing ignored every one of his attempts. Wu Tianzhao wanted to win over the House of Chang'an, but Prince Jing and the House of Chang'an were clearly on the same side. He'd suffered defeat at Prince Jing's hand before, and the House of Chang'an treated him coldly as well. He'd heard that the third prince had successfully placed a concubine in Prince Jing's residence, and he was afraid that the third prince would get to Prince Jing first and gain the support of the House of Chang'an. Wu Tianzhao knew he had no chance of winning over Prince Jing, and he had to find support elsewhere. However, the emperor was always keeping an eye on his sons, so he couldn't be too obvious about what he was doing. That was when this marriage presented itself at his doorstep. Wu Tianzhao had it all figured out. Jinju was a small bordering country, but they had money and troops, so if he married the princess of Jinju, her kingdom wouldn't support the other princes over him. If this panned out, his position would be hard to shake, even if the emperor ended up taking issue with him. Well, that's interesting. I'm struggling. I don't remember this being part of the original outcome. Was it? The second prince wants you to marry the princess? If it was part of, if they already mentioned it, you can let me know, but if not, just leave it. As for the Princess of Jinju, just becoming his side consort would be a huge honor for her. He could even promise her that she could become a noble consort once he ascended the throne. That would be even more than enough for the king of Jinju. Originally, he'd been thinking that even if the little princess was ugly, he'd accept her in exchange for Jinju's support. But when he got a look at her during the Imperial banquet, he found she was stunningly beautiful. She had a different kind of beauty than the women in his own country. Wu Tenjiao was more willing than ever to go through with his plan. Princess, Wu Tianzhao gestured for someone to bring a plate of desserts and softly said, "This is our famous butterfly pastry. Please have a taste." As its name suggested, butterfly pastries were made in the shape of a butterfly with its wings spread out, and the pastries came in pairs, symbolizing a century-long good marriage. Wu Tianzhao wanted to make a move first, to show others that the Princess of Jinju was going to be his, and ensure that any other suitor backed off. Okay, so luckily I actually know what a butterfly pastry looks like because I just watched a drama in which they weirdly just came into the conversation. So that is just nice to know because I don't think I've ever seen one in my personal life. He wouldn't have considered it in the original book because he never fell out of favor with the Emperor. Oh, that's fair. That makes total sense because in the original book there wasn't a fish to embarrass him. Okay, that is actually good in a weird way, potentially, depending. Because, like, if he becomes her husband, then he might end up becoming the target instead of Ye Shizi. And, like, I didn't mind the second prince overly much at the moment, but I feel like once we get into the rest of the novel, or like further into the novel, he'll become a real pain and a real threat. So it would be good to kind of have him out of the picture as soon as possible. The Emperor noticed that the second prince seemed to have fallen in love with the foreign princess. He had wanted the Duke of Chang'an's son and the Princess of Jinju to marry, but judging by Ye Qingyan's solemn expression on receiving the decree, he wasn't very interested in the princess. The Emperor wasn't going to make them marry right away, but he'd been thinking that he'd test the waters again with Ye Qingyan and discuss the matter with the House of Chang'an too. But then the second prince popped up all of a sudden. The Emperor was a little irritated, but he decided not to blame the second prince. It wasn't as if his son could read his mind, after all. He'd already rejected the idea of marrying the princess to one of his princes. If the second prince had such intentions, he wouldn't get very far unless the Princess of Jinju asked to be a side consort herself. That, he supposed, could be a possibility. If the second prince wanted to marry, then he'd need to have a few tricks up his sleeve. The Emperor wanted to see how Mu Tianzhao would handle this, so he didn't try to stop him. Oh, this is interesting. King Jinju ordered the butterfly pastries to be served to the princess, but the little princess just smiled and didn't try reaching for the desserts. Wu Tianzhao thought that the princess didn't know what the butterfly meant and was just about to take the opportunity to show off a little when he noticed that the princess wasn't looking at him at all. She was staring at something in the distance, with that pretty face of hers. What? Please tell me it's Prince Jing, because at least with Prince Jing, he has like the protagonist's halo protecting him from becoming a victim because the princess is interested in him. But if she is interested in, what is the Chang'an son name? What's his name? Ye Yan. Like, if she's interested in him, we are doomed. Feeling humiliated, Mu Tianzhao didn't rush to speak again. His eyes couldn't help but follow the princess's gaze, only to see Prince Jing feeding his fish from the table full of desserts as the fish lay on the edge of the fish tank, wagging its tail. Okay, yeah, I'm weirdly happy about this. So the princess was looking at the fish that brought disaster whenever the second prince saw him. Every time the fish flapped its tail, the princess smiled. Okay, so she's interested in the fish, at least on a oh, that's a cute animal basis. So Mu Tingjao secretly hated this fish. He didn't want to be rude during the Imperial banquet, so when he saw that Prince Jing had bought the wretched thing, he tried to pretend it didn't exist. But somehow the fish of misfortune had entered his line of sight again. The Princess of Jinju smiled so hard she blushed, and whispered to King Jinju occasionally. The second prince could only hear the word fish spoken softly and nothing else, but that was enough for him. He was certain that the stupid fish had stolen his stage again. The Princess of Jinju had no taste. How could a fish raised by a mute prince compare with him, a future crown prince? Mu Tianzhao glanced at the emperor. The emperor had also noticed Prince Jing feeding his fish due to the commotion around him. But instead of berating him, the emperor smiled as if he was happy to see Prince Jing busying himself with his pet. Wu Tinjiao felt the vine of jealousy taking root within his heart. Oh my goodness! This this illustration, guys. This illustration is so hilarious. Look at it. It's absolutely glorious. I just can't with everyone's different expressions. And the like tiny part of it where the fish is at the bottom. Oh goodness. Okay, sorry. He was the respected second prince and the future crown prince, but he wasn't able to do anything about this fish. Wu Tianjiao sat back, frustrated, his expression turning dark. Even though he was silent for a while, nobody paid him any attention. Thus, the second prince gave a couple of orders to the servants in charge of his food. The servant went to carry out his order and came back after a while, holding a bowl in his hand that contained a little soup. The servant knelt down, trembling. Your Highness, the kitchen didn't prepare carp soup today. Oh, I can just feel the prince's rage about to bubble over, but at the same time, I'm so glad that they didn't prepare carp soup because he thinks he's Prince Jing's enemy right now. Wait until he tries to eat carp soup in front of Prince Jing. They can start making it now, but it will take quite some time. For now, I thought white jade meatball soup in case the wait is too long. Would your Highness please at least have some? The servant spoke quietly, but there was no getting around the people nearby who were determined to pay attention to the second prince. Mo Tianming was seated close to the second prince, and he called out, Second brother, are the dishes at the banquet not to your liking? Why do you want to drink carp soup all of a sudden? I kind of low-key love the pettiness of calling him out on it for everyone to hear, even though I'm scared of all the princes bar Prince Jing. Mo Tianming deliberately raised his voice as he said the word carp. Most people, after staring in surprise at the second prince, looked in Prince Jing's direction afterward. Because Prince Jing was the only one with a carp right now, Leah, in his fish tank, lifted his head and cocked it embarrassingly. Oh, I'm so shy. Does the second prince want to make me into soup? But I'm still nibbling on the food my master has given me. Who hurt this man? This fish? Mu Tinjiao was silent. He could feel Prince Jing's icy cold eyes look over, and for some reason he felt panicked. But he didn't even do anything. He gritted his teeth. Third brother, you're overthinking it. I just wanted to drink some soup because I suddenly became thirsty. Mm-hmm. The fish is so cute with his mouth wide open. Yeah. His heart felt like it was twisting in on itself. Why was everyone berating him just for wanting to drink some fish soup? Prince Jing shot a cold look at Mu Tianzhao. Wang Xi was silent as he stood beside him, but he'd already started cursing Mu Tianzhao in his heart on Prince Jing's behalf. The emperor knelt in his the emperor knit his brows. Wanting to drink fish soup wasn't a problem, but since Prince Jing was the only one who'd bought a fish, the target of that specific request was rather obvious. Yeah, like that was plain dumb on Mu Tianzhao's part. Perhaps the second prince just hadn't anticipated that the third prince would expose his little acts of anger. The emperor had an extremely good impression of the little carp. The way Prince Jing cared for his pet made the emperor fond of it too. He thought the second prince was being a little too emotional. The princess of Jinju had been staring at Prince Jing's fish just now, and after watching it all this time, she had also come to like the fish. When she realized that the second prince wanted to drink fish soup, she immediately stood up and angrily said, "Your Highness, how could you drink fish soup in front of such a cute fish?" I didn't think you were that type of person. And this is what we call shooting yourself in the foot multiple times. Damn. Okay. To be honest, when the second prince had handed her that butterfly pastry, the princess of Jinju had actually been rather unimpressed. She was young, but she could tell that the second prince was trying to use her and Jinju. She was also well aware that she'd be relegated to the position of a side consort if she married him. She wasn't stupid. A position like that, where she could be easily thrown away, wasn't worth the country of Jinju's wholehearted support. What's more, there was no guarantee that the second prince could really ascend the throne, or when that would actually happen. Jinju didn't necessarily want to get involved in the conflict between the princes. I like the fact that she's smart. Like, that's already a massive win um, in my book. Okay, I'm gonna do one more page and then I think unfortunately I'm gonna have to call it a night. Sorry. So she had ignored the second prince, and when she learned that he wanted to secretly drink fish soup, the bold little princess jumped out to give his ego a couple of stomps, even though no one else was willing to speak up. And at the same time, she used this opportunity to hint to the emperor that she wasn't willing to enter a marriage with the second prince. Don't even think about it. Princess, you've misunderstood. That's not what's happening. Mu Tianzhao was speechless, his heart filled with anger, and he didn't know how to explain himself anymore. He didn't actually want to drink fish soup in front of the fish. He wanted to butcher the fish and make it into soup instead. That's worse, not better. Please check yourself. Was he supposed to tell her that? It was clear to the emperor that the princess of Jinju didn't have any intentions towards the second prince, so it would be better if the second prince refrained from using such dishonorable means. To put it nicely, he was trying to get into the princess's good graces, but to put it bluntly, he had failed to attract her. Earlier, the emperor had thought the second prince was earning his respect, but now he felt like the second prince's actions had slapped him in the face. Ying Yan was definitely more suitable. The emperor looked over at Yeshiza, who was sitting quietly a short distance from Prince Jing, and silently gave him a stamp of approval for being so mature and steady. Oh, this poor guy, he can't win. The emperor looked. Um, hmm, he decided to keep the Duke of Chang'an and Yeshiza after the banquet to speak to them alone. The second prince soon learned that the emperor planned to marry the princess to the Duke of Chang'an's son, and was already meeting with the Duke of Chang'an to discuss it. So they were all in cahoots. Meanwhile, he was immensely humiliated at the imperial banquet and didn't gain anything from it. The princess rejected him, the Duke of Chang'an refused to help him, and Prince Jing and his fish were laughing at him. The second prince had endured too much for too long. It was time to make a move. Great! I'm not worried at all. Look at me not being stressed even a little bit. Okay, that is the end of the chapter as well. I'm glad we actually managed to at least finish another chapter. We love a smart lady in this Dunmake economy. Yes, and it's so funny because I often find that the most inspiring women are Dunmake characters instead of like hetero novel characters. I'm like, why? Because I want some of these Dunmake ace women in my hetero novels getting the job and getting the man at the same time. Is that too much to ask? But anyways, side tangent. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know like what you guys thought. I hope you have a good weekend. And I'm not sure how we're gonna be doing next week and the week after that. I am probably not gonna be in town because I'm going off to visit my grandmother. So I'm gonna be putting up a poll on the community tab to kind of find out if you guys want me to wait so we continue with the live read-alongs once I get back, or if you want me to pre-film like 2 hour long read-alongs like I did for Scumberland. So yeah, that is currently kind of the thought. Right, at the end, perfect. Yeah, it's much more satisfying when it's at the end of a chapter. So yeah, I guess I will see you guys again next week. 再见。